welcome to the 94th consensus layer call. If you are on YouTube, please let us know if you can hear us. The agenda, which I just shared, is 1. Merge. Research, spec, and discussion as point 2. It looks like there's a couple of 4844 topics that we did not get to last time. If we have the sufficient crew here to go over them, we will. Otherwise, we can take it to asynchronous chat if not. And then general open discussion. On the merge, we don't have any particular agenda items. Micah, we started like 10 seconds before you got here. We don't have particular agenda items, but open discussion. Does anybody want to take the floor on the merge? Is there anything we need to discuss today?
Just the updates from the last shadow fork. We had a good one last time, and on Monday we updated the nodes with the latest Geth version. And with the update, we did see some regression, or we did see a new issue in the Geth release that's been patched already. So please have a look at the Geth release notes. And to continue the shadow fork trend, we will be having mainnet shadow fork 12 next week. And currently I'm using the latest versions recommended on the blog.
Great.
Is anyone from Aragon here? Because we're still seeing a bunch of bad blocks on mainnet shadow fork 11. So it would be really nice to know what the status of the issue is.
On a quick scan, I don't think Aragon is here. I can ping them in the execution layer chat after the call. And if they do join, we will ask.
I do know that they were able to reproduce the invalid transact or the invalid proposals also on their own Robson nodes. So I think they're also looking at some redeployments and some fixes. So potentially the fix would make it to Robson before the shadow fork.
So they are aware of the issue?
Yeah, they're aware of the issue. They tried, I think, 1 or 2 fixes that potentially didn't work.
Okay.
But it was a bit too much friction to keep trying it on the shadow fork, so they were able to reproduce it on their own Robson instances. And I think they're just testing out, trying to figure out what's going on there instead.
Got it. Other merge discussion items? Yeah, I will mention, as Mario said in the chat, the EF runs a bounty program, and normally critical vulnerabilities can get up to $250,000 US. Between now and shortly before the target of the merge, I can't remember the exact date, something like the 8th of September, these critical vulnerabilities are 4x'd. The entire bounty program is 4x, so you can receive up to $1 million for criticals, and then quite a range, September 8th, yes, Marius, in that, depending, low, mid, high. So, find some bugs. Lucas.
Is the severity a function of, is the severity higher for finding a bug in a majority client, such as Geth?
Impact to the live network is considered, so I would say to some extent, yes. Lucas?
So 2 things from Nethermind side. One is the ongoing issues with empty blocks if we don't have enough time for FCU. So I think we had issues with Lordstar and Nimbus, and I think Lordstar already fixed it, and it will be releasing it was released before the version that will come before the merge, but I think Nimbus already had a fix but didn't release it yet. So as we will have one more release, we are debating if we should just revive the kind of workaround that also Get has, that just waiting for a block for some small amount of time on get payload if we didn't have enough time in the first place. So yeah, that's kind of, we are debating if we should do that, because if not, then if someone uses Nethermind with Nimbus, he will have a bad experience. It's not something we want to do, but it's like lesser evil to move it
Alright,
back for some
I
short
think
of time.
this was one of the kind of fixes that were supposed to land in the 22.8 release, but since we discovered kind of some issues in the pull request in the last minute, we decided to kind of hold this off. So, but it has been merged now, indeed, and it will be part of our hardening release just before the merge.
Okay, just before the merge. So it's like, should we release with this fix? So maybe we will bring this hotfix just for one version before the merge, just to if anyone has a problem, he could just use this version for a short amount of time, and then we will again remove it. Okay, that's one thing, which we just want to have a good experience. On the other hand, this is out of spec, and we also don't want to keep this hotfix. But okay, so that's probably what we'll do. And the second thing is, again, I don't have the full picture here, but we also experienced some edge cases in syncing with some clients. And this is because we are syncing a bit differently. So basically it's about they're checking if we have a block or get logs for some older blocks, and we can get to head and start processing new blocks on head, while we still haven't downloaded the entire ancient history. So we, for example, cannot serve blocks or cannot answer on some old blocks queries. I think this is fairly unique to Nethermind. Like, no one else does this way, and they firstly download the ancient history and then later they start processing blocks. So it's an edge case, and it's fine. For example, if you give it time, I think there was problem with Prism, but I'm not sure if anything else. So I don't think there's a big deal, but generally I would advise consensus clients to have some testing around this scenario when Nethermind syncs to the head but doesn't have old blocks yet, and if they can handle this. Normally we return an error that we don't have this, so we expect, and I know that some CL clients will behave like that, they will just retry until they get it, right? So because we will eventually get it, but yeah, that's it. And we are also changing ETF syncing here, but it's shouldn't be relied on probably, but we are changing ETF syncing that right now when we already start processing on head, we return ETF syncing false, but now we will be returning ETF syncing true until we have all the historical blocks. So that's potential fix for the future, but it's not a big deal. But it's a user experience. Like, it can be potentially a problem that for users that sometimes they need to wait and restart something or something like that. So it's suboptimal, and it is because Nethermind has a bit different sync order than other clients. Yeah, that's it for me.
I have a question to your get payload thing. Do I understand correctly that the timeout will only be turned on when there is when there is only an empty payload?
Yes.
Okay. And is it in the merge compliance release already?
No. So we are debating, because we will have one more release before the merge, because we have around two to 3 weeks schedule. Like, we don't want to release in bigger like spaces, and we are still doing some bug fixing, some related to the merge, some related to JSON RPC. So we want to have a release, better release. So yeah, that's the idea. It's not in the current version.
Yeah, I was saying that in the Discord, so that I'm in general against any fixing or optimizing the thing on the other layer where the responsibility should be taken on another one on the counterparty. But yeah, considering that we are close to the merge, I think that in this very much of an edge case, meaning that get payload will be responded correctly if CL works correctly. So it will be responded. It will return the payload immediately if CL send FCU in advance. I think, yeah, it's up to you, but probably it's okay to go with this or without it.
I hope it will be a temporary. I hope it will be a temporary workaround that we can retire after like another version.
We tested on mainnet shadow fork with Nimbus, and it's working fine, and we have no empty blocks.
Oh, cool! So it helped. Great.
Yeah. So from Lodestar, I want to confirm that we have included the fix for issuing advanced FCU in our version 1 release, so that should not be an issue anymore.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think you fix it, right? So that's the only Nimbus was a problem. But again, we don't want to be discarded as a client because we have a compatibility issue. So that's why it's temporary workaround.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Got it. Any other merge related discussions?
I saw a discussion in the interop channel about changing the status of the payload after restart, which may help to recover in some scenarios when EL responded invalid and then changed its mind or whatever. I just wanted to, I don't have a lot of details, just wanted to ask people if you want to share something about that on the call.
This is essentially forgetting the invalid cache on restart or persisting, and that design issue, Mikhail?
Yeah, that's essentially all some clients have the approach as follows. So they just forget they consider all blocks optimistic after the justified one. So, and they just send them again to EL to get the status. But some clients, probably Lighthouse, and I remember, they persist the status, and restart doesn't help to recover. And there was like a discussion that an option that is not turned on by default to persist the status should be added to be able to recover from this case by a restart, but not doing any manipulation with the database.
Yeah, I mean, it's not switching back from invalid. It's more like forgetting. Forgetting is the correct characterization, because there's like an infinite number of invalid blocks out there potentially that people could create, but only a finite set of valid blocks. So I think that's the background to our strategy, at least.
Yeah, I think it makes sense in general.
And I can't speak for everyone, but I know there was some discussion around it, and those that were not forgetting did acknowledge that it's probably a reasonable strategy for recovery. So I believe that there was momentum to move in that direction for clients that were not there.
Yeah, attack would discard, so at restart, it's considering everything optimistic and actually save us with some Bezu interaction where it changed its mind and we were able to recover within the after the very next head.
So Prism does something in the middle. So we inadvertently were not recalling the persisting because we remove invalid blocks from our database. So if you restart, we don't even have those invalid blocks to start with. But on top of that, we don't sync like other clients from a fork choice. We don't dump fork choice to disk. So when we restart, we just restart from the finalized checkpoint, and everything below it is optimistic. So we are always forgetting everything anyways.
Yeah, Nimbus has a similar thing. We don't persist fork choice. We just reload it on startup from blocks, basically.
All right.
Painful of strategy.
Mikhail, anything else on this one?
No, not from my end.
Got it. Any discussion points around MEV boost?
Hey everyone. So there's been a post on his research about removing trusted relays using threshold encryption. Not sure if folks have had a chance to check it out, but wondering what people think about this proposal. If anything, might be getting out of topic, but just thought to bring it up now that Danny mentioned it. So the basic idea is that basically relays will be receiving encrypted bodies, and there will be a threshold encryption scheme where a committee of keepers will then be able to disclose the master key that is able to allow decryption for proposers. So it's an interesting approach to preserving privacy here. And I thought it's worthwhile to have a discussion about it at some point. I believe Yanni is working on it. So yeah, very interesting research coming up.
And such a design does not preclude a centralized relay as well, right? Like you could communicate with some sort of committee relay. You could also, the protocol doesn't have to be fundamentally, doesn't have to remove centralized relays in lieu of committee relays.
Yeah, I think that is correct. Yep.
One of my concern is like it's good, but if we do this, does it delay proposer builder separation or not?
Together with merge releases, but what we'll also be doing is document, like in the documentation for the feature, we'll be highlighting that some of the relays may potentially be having differences in transaction selection strategies that don't necessarily reflect the transaction fee.
Yeah, also the issue with this design is that basically there's no way to really validate kind of the body, before the full reveal is done. So basically they propose kind of like an optimistic approach where there could be some kind of slashing mechanism after the fact if there are being invalid bodies being proposed. So that's also adds more complexity to the project. But it seems to be one of the few proposals that is actually tackling, the privacy aspect at the core level.
Just out of curiosity, is threshold encryption still not fast enough to actually execute a block in a reasonable amount of time?
Fast enough and what angle?
I was thinking like an MPC committee that would validate the block without anyone actually knowing what's in the block.
I don't know the answer to that question.
From what I understand for this design, basically you just hide the transaction contents until some other time. And I do think there are some performance considerations with threshold encryption, like namely it not being like that fast. And so the way you get around that is you can just batch things and say, yeah, like rather than have, you know, this set of transactions in the next block, it might take a bit longer to like gather like a block that would land on chain, and you just have to like adjust the parameters of the system to account for that. I have a question about the circuit breaker work, and namely like how clients are in terms of implementing it. I know Lighthouse had something, TechU I saw had a merge PR, and yeah, I guess I'd wonder then if Nimbus, Lodestar, or Prism have had a chance to look at that yet.
Yeah, so our circuit breaker was merged in V3, which was a couple of days ago. So we're using 3A parameter. So 3 meaning that 3 slots missed consecutively, and the 8 means that 8 slots missed within the epoch. And then, 8 slots missed within the last 32 slots within like a rolling window style. And we actually count the block as miss. So for the orphan blocks, we don't count them as missed. So that's kind of our strategy here. Yeah.
Tech would just merge the the logic for the moving window. Is enabled by default with 32 slots window and a maximum 8 missing slot. And the approach is only looking at the state. So we look at the current state we have during the block production proposing. So we only look at the block history in the state to find out if there are some missing slots.
For Lodestar, it's work in progress, and we aim to merge it maybe next week.
We also will be focusing on this in the coming weeks. Still no implementation for Nimbus.
Great, thanks everyone.
Great. Any other merge related items? Cool. Moving on. There's a couple 4844 discussion points. Let's see. Does anyone have the context on this first item? Whether the blob gas price update rule in the EIP should be optimized for stable throughput or bursts of blobs? Maybe Barnaby.
This has to do with sorry, go ahead, Barnaby. I thought maybe you could.
Sorry, I don't have an update on this. I didn't really look at that question. So should it be a burst or a average?
Yeah, so the gist of it is in order to decide how we want to adjust the gas price, between blocks, we need to know, do we prefer to have things bursty, or do we prefer them to be spread out between blocks? Like, is it from a client implementation perspective, is it less work if we do a bunch of them at once, or is it less work if we do like one per block, as an example? And that will inform whether we want a gas pricing strategy that results in burstiness, or do we want one that results in a very smooth distribution.
So do we know what's better on the client side, if it's regular processing versus processing all at once?
Yeah, that's the question, I think, for SEAL devs.
Any thoughts on this one? Or do we need to have this asynchronous or in a call where people have read it? Okay. We should probably open up an issue to talk about it then. Number 2 here was whether blob syncing should be tightly coupled to block syncing. Quote, long term, the desire is to decouple this, but this adds implementation complexity, and given the low number of blobs, it might be best to sync blobs along their associated blocks. Right, so there is a design goal in 4844 to essentially have it such that really one of the only things that's changing when moving to a larger sharded data construction is that your data availability check is changed. If you tightly couple these things, you then add more work potentially in the future when you have to decouple them. But presumably, if you have just a block sync mechanism that pulls them down simultaneously, then you simplify things out the gate. Does anybody want to take the argument for one or the other?
So I wrote this design doc. We don't have to go through it. So I kind of explore the different trade-off. And honestly, like you said, like I feel like the difference is pretty small because like even though it's decoupled, right, it's still like attestation and beacon block today where like you don't really process this attestation in the for choice until the block is seen. So you have to implement some type of pending cure, and then most clients do implement the pending cure already. So I think like it's fine, but I do want to hear like other clients' feedback regarding preferably having them coupled. And I think another point, it's like how does checkpoint syncing work? Because like today you do checkpoint syncing, you started from checkpoint state, and then you have to backtrack to get the blobs from the last month. And so that part is slightly trickier because now you have to also backtrack to get the blob as well. So if them being together, I think that UX may be slightly better because now you can just backtrack to get the blobs. You don't backtrack to get the blobs. You don't have to backtrack to get the blobs. So that's another like decision factor as well. But yeah.
I mean, as someone not in the weeds of implementing it, my intuition here is keep them separate because such a waiting queue would exist when you had data availability sampling. Essentially, you're blocked on importing a block or considering it part of your block tree until you handle that data availability sampling function. Similarly, as you'd be blocked on retrieving the blob. I think the symmetry there is really nice and kind of sets the code base up for what we need there. And as you said, there's the attestation analog. But the historic retrieval, I don't have a good intuition here as to the complexity.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Like the code is already there, and then it's also future extensible. It's totally reusable. So that's quite nice.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, to be more forward compatible, and to do the shortcut only if we are tight in time in general. So if you're going to design something that will support better the next version, even if it get a little bit more complex now, I'm definitely for that.
Okay, so happy to hear other input here, but I think the specs, we should still kind of bias in this modular standpoint where blobs, the retrieval of blobs, the availability of blobs are kind of isolated from the core of blocks. And if someone feels strongly otherwise, obviously when we're modding, messing with specs, chime in there. And you know, if complexity begins to bite us, we can open up the conversation again. Okay, and then there was another link to a comment from Proto from 2 weeks ago, and there's a number of 4844 items. Proto, you're not here, are you? No. I'm doing a quick scan here to see if there's any pressing points. Here's the link you can do as well. Okay, so it looks like okay, so he's agreeing. Does anybody have an BLST update or other crypto library update on extending the functionality for optimized KZG?
The BLST team contacted me last week about my like use cases on KZG, but that's just gathering requirements, I guess.
Got it. And I do know Proto's watching the call. Hey, Proto. I do know that a couple of people on the research team have been speaking with Supernational, the BLST maintainers, about getting some of the requisite crypto in there. So I know there's stuff in progress, but this is relatively early. And then the final point is an EIP 4844 testnet. First experimental version is running, but missing the new fees approach and likely needs to be restarted to include more test ETH and add a faucet. Does anybody have a status update on current testnet or plans for future testnet? Okay. I think we're all kind of in a merge shell shock still, but let's continue this conversation over the next handful of weeks as the merge approaches, and maybe something pretty important to reboot at DevCon, kind of get a new target in terms of current specs, current engineering, and play with some new testnets from there. Sorry for my relative unorganized 4844 discussion. Is there anything else that people want to talk about with 4844 right now? Great. Anything else related to the merge, related to research, related to specifications?
So regarding the merge, I just wanted to ask how other client teams have encountered, the community's preparation for the merge and how people are dealing with the latest updates. I know a lot of clients release their obviously their merge ready releases out there. In Prism, a lot of folks have no idea what an execution client is. A lot of folks have had issues with JWT. Many don't know that you need to run, an EL client. Just quite a bit of confusion, but I do feel like it's getting better. Just wanted to gauge how other clients are feeling about their users, their stakers, or anyone else that's running, running their nodes.
I didn't get that much feedback, but the feedback that I've heard was rather negative about people really knowing how to configure. But it was not first-hand feedback that I was discussing most recently. So I think for the solo validators, it might be not the best, but so I would keep pushing as much education material as possible. I think we're doing that already, but the more the better.
So I noticed quite a lot of users that are asking questions that Nethermind is not syncing, and I asked, what is your consensus client? And they, for example, for Gerli, and they were confused that they need to run consensus client right now. So yeah, I noticed some users with this problem.
Yeah, similar experience in Nimbus. We have a lot of users asking about the JW secret and the fact that they have to switch to a different RPC connection, that there are now two RPC interfaces, one for the CL and one for normal users. This is causing confusion with the ports. The other thing is the suggested fee recipient. There's not great clarity on what that is and why it's suggested, and how it's different from the CL balance. So we're working on clarifying those things in our documentation as well.
Yeah, I will say ETHSaker did have a validator workshop. This is the fourth one yesterday. If video content is how you learn, I highly recommend checking that out. And then Samer did update his guides, or has a new set of merge guides, and also has some guides that bridge his old guides to his new guides that just dropped yesterday or the day before. Highly recommend. We'll check those out.
How far away?
Not a smallish. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Another small issue I'd also mention is that in Nimbus, at least, we don't start calling the execution API until Bellatrix has happened, on the theory that the execution client might not be ready for it. Now, execution clients on their side are that there is no consensus client if it's not calling the execution configuration call. So we're kind of waiting until September 6th for this warning to go away, but that's just a small thing that we've put in our docs as well for users to expect.
Yeah, you can't win on that one. We do the opposite, and we're getting complaints. So
that's true.
Why are people complaining about the opposite?
Well, because they haven't upgraded their execution clients yet, and we're complaining that we can't see it because Teku's expecting to see it now, even though we haven't reached Bellatrix.
I see.
How far away are we from? How far away are we from having it where we can automatically just connect an EL and CL for people who aren't trying to set up a really sophisticated, long-running instance on their computer? Like if I want to connect to a testnet right now, it seems like I need to create these JWTs in places, and it would be preferable if I were to just go into Nethermind --Sepolia, Prism --Sepolia, and they just are able to connect to each other without any additional setup.
So, I mean, the JWT is spec'd as requisite, so it's hard to get around that unless we subvert that.
What? I mean, I think if we have a standard place that we try and write JWTs to, that that sort of gives us a way towards connecting them. But I don't know if there's other ideas on that.
We were discussing this, and one thing that changed in the last month, I think, is that previously there wasn't clarity on who should create the JWT secret. So right now we're in the situation where all guides recommend that users create it manually, but de facto the latest execution they create it. There's two things needed: a standard location and an agreement in consensus clients that we kind of keep looking for the JWT secret we start up, because the consensus client might start before the execution client, so the JW secret file might not exist yet. There are like these little race conditions there. Otherwise, standardizing on the port 8551, I think, is another such simplification.
Are we not standardized on port right now?
It is specified. I don't know if anyone's diverging.
The JWT secret location and name is not, so they're called different by every execution client. The port, maybe, but a lot of users are coming from the old RPC jungle, where they have all kinds of ports and they're confused about the fact that they need to change it.
Okay. I mean, is anybody opposed to adding some default locations for the JWT token that the EL can generate and the CL can look for?
Are CLs and ELs currently storing them unencrypted on disk?
Yeah.
So my instinct here is just that we shouldn't be storing those unencrypted on disk, but maybe that's just being overly cautious. If that instinct is correct, though, then I feel like a shared location would still have the problem of needing to share the decryption key, or whatever that might mean.
During the exchange, would it be possible for one of the clients to say, I've written a JWT to this location? Do you have permissions to read it from that location?
You're saying to put this information in the exchange configuration API?
Right.
These defaults kind of also assume that you're running on the same host, but I guess that's what the default's good for.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to work backwards from a user who just wants to connect to Gurley, and previously they were able to connect to Gurley by typing in geth -- Gurley, and now they are syncing. And I would like it to be as easy, except maybe now in another window they also type Nimbus -- network Gurley.
Can I interfere a bit? So Nevermind DevOps developed this solution called Sedge. It was actually the working name was OneClick. And the idea is to provide a user this kind of a way of very easily setting up their nodes. It uses Docker underneath. But the downside right now, it's not stable release yet. But I think it's stable enough. We are using it for our smoke test, for example. But the other downside is it doesn't support all the clients. On execution layer side, it currently supports only Geth and Nethermind, and on consensus, Lighthouse, Lordstar, Prism, and Teku. So I know they
Adding
are.
a JV.
I know they will be working on other support of other clients. It might be also useful if those clients would like to have support to make their own PRs maybe to this tool if they want. But yeah, it's generally simpler to set up for end user. But it's again some third-party thing. So if you want something you know, it has its upsides and downsides as everything, but the idea was to
Yeah.
make it simpler.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool. And I think it plays a role in the overall story, but I do think that we could pretty easily set some defaults for the people who want to run the clients on bare metal and not go through Docker. And that should also be part of the whole story.
Well, yes, but it's harder to automate this way. So that's why I think this was chosen.
Is there anything that needs to be automated besides a list of places to look for a JWT token?
Not entirely sure, but it also allows you to pick from different networks, things like that. So yeah, depends.
So each major OS has pretty standard places for storing things. I suspect the easiest thing to do would just be to have someone go and do the research to find what those standard places are, and then carve out a spot for Ethereum and propose it as a spec. That's what I would do if I was interested in this.
Right.
Do you shove that in the engine API as a suggestion?
I think it goes in the auth portion of the engine API.
Right.
All right, since this topic is kind of over, I would also mention one more thing. The light client protocol has been merged, right? And actually one way of driving an Ethereum node, an execution node, is using the light client protocol these days. So we do have a beta of Nimbus Light Client that basically does the same thing as a full beacon node, but instead of being a full beacon node, it just follows the Light Client protocol. So that's an easy option if people want to just follow the chain without validating. The obvious upsides are network bandwidth, and
we lost you, Yasik.
blah, blah, blah.
We lost you, but we can hear you now.
All right, so I don't know where I lost.
Obvious benefits are network bandwidth and
Obvious benefits, network bandwidth, CPU usage. Downside, you follow the chain a slot and a half behind everybody else, so 15 seconds. And you're relying on the light client.
the security
protocol,
of the
some
light
of the-
client security.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is there a link to that you can share with our viewers? Or is that or is that do you run it off of Nimbus ETH2 with some sort of configuration, or is it a separate piece of software?
It's a separate piece of software right now. I'll post a link in the consensus there because I'm talking through my phone right now, and but I'll post a link in the R&D channel.
Cool.
Is there aspirations to having that as one binary with the Nimbus ETH1 client eventually, or probably not?
Probably yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's no reason not to. We're also planning on publishing this as a C library for anybody that wants to integrate it, but because we will be integrating it into wallets.
Nice. So, for example, with the correct bindings, Geth could have that in light client consensus mode.
Oh yeah, totally. like Geth. The other thing that's bubbling under the surface is something we call a light proxy. Basically, if you take the JSON RPC interface of an existing execution client and you combine it with a call called eth_get_proof, which is, I don't remember the IP now.
We lost you again.
They'll figure it out in 45 seconds or so.
Yeah, okay. Light client options. Light client options might actually help for our standard user UX with more straightforward builds. Hey, we lost you. You're back.
Oh no. My internet keeps dropping. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. I don't know exactly where you were. You were discussing an EIP.
All right, so light proxy. There's an eth_get_proof call in Geth, which allows you to get a Merkle proof for any state, basically. And that Merkle proof, you can verify it now with the light client. So basically what you can build is a JSON RPC proxy that uses something like Infura or any other, data provider. And then it validates the data that is provided via these Merkle proofs against the data that comes from a light client. So you can build like a very, very nice wallet verifier.
In Lodestar, we also do something similar. In fact, we have a demo website running in browser. Basically, you can do all the stuff. You can get finalized and the latest from Lodestar Light client server. And then again, you use this as an anchor to find out what are the headers for the execution blocks. And then you can basically, again, use the verify and get proof API to get those headers. And we have gone even a step further where you can also fetch the storage slots of the contracts to verify what the token balances can be. And again, you can use the verify API and verify that, okay, this is the valid token balance, and it all links to the state root that is referred by the block header that comes from the latest and finalized from the light client. So we also have this running in the browser, courtesy to some Ethereum JS libraries as well.
Pleased. Okay. Other discussion points?
A small note on this discussion regarding the way the client stores the state, and some clients forgets almost everything and stores from the starts from a checkpoint or so. And is it a problem that after the restart they have a bit of limited view, like the gossip attestations are not remembered and so on? Is it an issue or not? Because at Granina we also do the same thing. We forget everything and start from the checkpoint.
Given that the fork choice is LMD, latest message driven, the reconstruction from blocks and then listening to new gossip, I believe, should be very sufficient. There might be some sort of degenerate case where your worldview is like slightly off, but I would say that it's fine for boot.
Yes, so generally this is not considered as an issue, and that's okay to restore the limited view.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Micah, you had a discussion point you brought up in the chat.
Sure, this is the last one. I don't want to take time away from anything else.
It does seem to be the last one.
Okay. I will try to keep it short since I think most of you are on the All Core Devs call or have listened to it, so it doesn't need to be long. The general gist is that I think everybody here probably knows that one of the primary security benefits that proof of stake provides is the fact that we can punish bad actors after the fact, unlike with proof of work. With proof of work, if someone mining attacks the network with a reorg type attack, so that means censorship reorgs or double spend type reorgs, there's nothing you can do about it afterwards. Like, they keep their hardware, you can't take their hardware away from them. And so if you fork away, either you fork away the entire mining algorithm, or which hurts everybody, or you fork away and then just come back and do it again. So so as Danny said, the key here is these are failure modes that we know about, and we can and are attributable, so we can assign blame to a person, but we cannot automatically handle them. And reorg attacks are this class of things, so censorship and double spends, that sort of stuff. The problem is that it seems that a lot of people don't understand that this is part of the protocol. It's the human and social part of the protocol, but it's like by design. This is why we're switching to proof of stake, is so we have this capability. And so a lot of people think that, if someone gets 51% or whatever and executes a censorship attack or a reorg attack or a double spend or whatever, like once it's finalized and that's it. Or it doesn't finalize, it's still, tough luck. And so I think it's important for the core devs to signal. I'm not asking for people to do this like as an official statement as a team, just generally signal to the public and try to make it known that this is part of the protocol to do a user activated soft fork or hard fork in order to punish attributable attackers after the fact. And just let people know that, as core devs, we've got reason to argue for both, I think, and I think that's out of scope for this conversation. For this conversation, I think it's just important that we let users know this is in fact part of the protocol. This is not core devs going off and doing something new. This is like user activated soft fork or user activated hard fork. So really, this is just, we don't even have to discuss if no one has anything to talk about. It's just a plea to all the core devs to make it well known publicly. When people ask on whatever your social media you use, if you happen to use any, tell your friends, let people know that this is an intended part of how proof of stake works, and this is not just some bunch of core devs just getting together and deciding they don't like somebody. Like, this is very intentional and built into the protocol.
Cool. If you didn't check out All Core Devs from last week, interesting conversation. Any discussion points based off of Micah's comments?
We need some kind of constitution, some values, in this case censorship resistance, that would be like very clear for everyone and uncontestable that it's okay to slash in that case. Otherwise, who controls the controllers, let's say? I mean, users can decide not to use updated client, for example, but still.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The users being able to predict the behavior of the developers that are building the chain that they're using is very valuable. So users knowing that we will eventually move to proof of stake was very valuable for users, because they can plan for that. They can, they can decide, is this the chain they want to use long in advance? They don't get bought in first and then later find out you did something that goes against them. And so I tend to agree. I think the Ansgar has argued that the critical factor here is if we see someone intentionally reorging blocks, where intentional is, we can statistically say that they were intentionally doing this because, we've seen them repeatedly under these conditions not build on the previous parents, or that not attest to the proper fork choice rule. This would be an intentional reorg, and that covers pretty much all the cases I think that we need to worry about.
Right, I don't know if you need to go into more soft constitution there. There is a protocol. There's a protocol for finding the head, and if you have a certain percentage of the network and do not follow that protocol, you can induce reorgs, which is against the protocol. I guess that's.
You're saying even broader than reorg. Just if we can detect that you were running a client that is not to protocol with enough hash power to influence the network, then that would be the critical event.
Yeah, without thinking too deeply about all of the types of things that can emerge there. That's my intuition, but.
Yeah, and the nice thing about something like that is it's very cut and dry. There's not a lot of wishy-washy like, oh, is this censorship or is this not censorship, blah, blah, blah. It's just either you follow the protocol or you don't. And so I like it. So yeah, tell your friends, please. Tell your, when journalists reach out to you, please let them know that this is intended behavior of the protocol. We will do it, etc.
Okay. Are there any other topics for today before we close? If you are listening and you are confused about how to configure your system, each one of these clients does have a Discord. The ETH Staker folks are very helpful. There are some guides by Samare and others. The Launchpad does have a preparation checklist. And there are some videos of people configuring this stuff from ETH Staker. There's also a merge community call on the 9th. This is after Bellatrix, but upgrading Bellatrix, I recommend upgrading consensus layer and execution layer in tandem just to be prepped and ready to go. But if you can only upgrade your consensus layer, you will make it through Bellatrix, and there will be a community call on the 9th if there are lingering questions or concerns. The 9th is potentially very close to the merge, so that is a last-ditch effort if you have final questions, but try to follow these guides, jump in these Discords, get your stuff upgraded.
Yeah, and there's a good chance that if you start syncing your execution client and you're just doing a normal sync or a not snap sync, you may not actually finish between Bellatrix and the merge, depending on how smoothly things go for you.
Okay, we will close it here. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations on getting those releases out. Talk to you all very soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.